What movie is a lot darker than people realize? Lilo and Stitch. Nanny is like 19, taking care of her little sister who has behavioral problems, while being investigated by CPS, on top of working and trying to pay for a whole house. Man. She also gave up what appeared to a promising surf career, judging by the trophies. My mom had me at 19, and I had behavioral issues. She could have been a stylist on a cruise ship if she didn't have me, so even as a kid this movie was like a punch in the gut. You were obviously worth it then. You have a lot of upvotes, but it needs to be said that that was a really sweet comment. The Incredibles attempted suicide. Lots of unseen collateral damage and possible civilian deaths. The systematic assassination of superheroes. Random fact about the movie I just recently learned. When Elastigirl borrows that jet which gets shot down, the original script actually had the guy in the photograph piloting the craft. We'd get backstory that he was actually her sidekick when she was in the business, flying her around to places to do her thing. They created the scene with her and the kids surviving before they made the decision not to include the character. So the part with her underwater looking as the cockpit sinks away actually had a deeper meaning, that she was watching the corpse of a lifelong friend sinking to the bottom of the ocean. The reason they cut that content was because the movie was too long and they had to give him screen time if they wanted you to care about a character dying at all. It didn't make for a good scene killing him without him being on screen for more than the few seconds they really had for him. They also cut out more of the infidelity. Elastigirl finding a platinum blonde hair on Mr. Incredible's suit and he jokingly says he's having an affair with the old lady at the dry cleaning. They also cut out more of the infidelity. Whoa. Was there actual infidelity? Defined as a violation of their emotional or sexual exclusivity? It never felt like Mirage was any sort of partner. The reason they cut that content was because the movie was too long and they had to give him screen time if they wanted you to care about a character dying at all. I'm not sure this resonates with me. Without Elastigirl piloting, we wouldn't get the moment of dialogue where her emotion on the radio really sells how afraid she is and communicates to the audience how much threat they are in. Sorry, accusation of infidelity. There was nothing actually romantic between the two, though it's implied that she's interested. Big with Tom Hanks. Little boy ends up in a grown body, has a romantic interlude with his grown boss, tells boss has a kid, and goes back to his life. He's like 11 and has sex with a grown woman. Pretty traumatic. And then she finds out what she's done and realizes she's an accidental pedophile. No one's coming back from any of that. Correct me if I'm wrong. But doesn't she chase after him and say something to the effect of come find me in another 10 years? Home Alone is about two adults trying to murder a child. I'm sure many parents rented Watership Down or The Secret of NIHM expecting cute family fun. The Secret of Nemo. You mean Nicodemus and the Eyes of Satan. Loved the book, though. The Brave Little Toaster. Made the mistake of watching this movie on mushrooms. BC I remembered loving it as a kid. God damn it gets dark. The whole worthless song, where cars are just being crushed to death and singing about it was fucking brutal. How about the radiator, who gets so mad about being stuck on the wall, while constantly in denial that it does bother him, that this is his life and there is nothing he can do about it. That he literally kills himself? I thought it was an air conditioning unit. Has been years since I've seen it though. Coraline. I could watch it fine as a kid, but apparently some people couldn't. Watched it when I was older and was like, oh, yeah, my kids all watch it, unfazed. Meanwhile, husband and I are all. I feel like what freaked parents most during that movie was when she fell asleep next to the fake parents she made out of pillows. All dogs go to heaven. That hellish, pun intended, dream sequence still freaks me out to this day. Dude, same. That shit was too much. Snow White. Stepmother wants to murder 14-year-old girl because she is prettier than her. 14-year-old finds a random house in the woods. Decides to clean it. Lives as a servant of 7 men in exchange for a place to stay. A random prince finds a corpse in the woods. Decides to kiss it. Most of the fairy tales came from a dark place. The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Esmeralda was nearly burned alive, and Frollo's song was terrifying. One of the best Disney songs of all time. Shrek, it shows how people have hatred for other people just because of the way they are, religion, looks, race, culture, poverty. It has a good lesson that we should love everybody regardless of all the stupid goofy stuff. I don't have a problem with the world, K. It seems as if the world has a problem with me, Shrek. The second movie goes further too, with Shrek's own Phil trying to get rid of him because of a combination of a dislike for Shrek's race and being manipulated by the fairy godmother. Also, a lot of the citizens seem very alarmed by Shrek. Also, isn't his Phil under some kind of glamour spell and in actuality a frog? Talk about the pot calling the kettle black. Racism really is just outsourcing insecurity and self-loathing to an easy target. Damn, I never thought about that. But yeah, that internalized racism/specism is a killer. Yeah, the movie has layers. That joke isn't in the movie for no reason. Zootopia. If you think about it, the carnivore animals have to be eating something, which means there are probably subservient animals hidden somewhere that are bred primarily for the carnivores to eat off of. Even ignoring that, the plot of the movie was surprisingly dark for a Disney movie, with that angry lamb. The original plot of the movie focused more on Nick and was dark as fuck. Zootopia existed, but it was run primarily by /for prey species which outnumbered the predators. Predators were legally required to wear shock collars which would trigger if the wearer got excited, and I think prey species could trigger them remotely as well. But I can't remember for sure. Nick's whole objective is to try and make a theme park where the predators can take off their collars and do things like roar on a loud roller coaster. All the banks are run by rodents and they won't give loans to predators. Even the nicest one in the montage they filmed basically said, we'd love to give loans to predators, but since nobody has given you loans, you don't have a credit history, so we can't trust that you'll pay it back. A catch-22. So the reason Nick gets involved with the Mayfair is that he's basically given up. He figures, best case he gets his money, second best case they kill him for daring to come to them for money. Either way his quest is over. And along the way, Judy's character basically exists to be a character that tries to justify that the predator protections were needed and good, while struggling to deal with the fact that they very clearly were horrible. In the background we see a fish market that shows what they were eating. But what doesn't make sense is if the fish are as intelligent as the others, we also never see any birds or reptiles of any kind. It's all mammals. The animals in the city are referred to as mammals, so it's possible only mammals have sentience. There's an interview where they stated they just didn't have time to create the reptile and bird residents. I think there's even concept art out there of the planned location for them. Monster Incorporated. They use screams of innocent children and might even scar them for life to have electricity. Let's not about how Randall the Vandal planned to kidnap children to suck their voice or something. Not to mention that Wartonus was willing to kidnap children just to keep his company afloat. Instead of investing in alternative energy, he decides to go out and harm another world. Sort of like a commentary on how we are destroying our own world because we won't simply adopt another energy source. Or a commentary on imperialism and outsourced exploitation. Wars in the Middle East, African mines, Chinese sweatshops, and Thai brothels come to mind. Return of the GD, or more specifically the Ewoks. Now I know what you're gonna say. Those stupid fuzzy little jungle bears were dumb and the worst part of the film, Abe. But think about their introduction. They captured a much more highly advanced military party and were about to eat them. Did you see the stormtroopers' helmets at the end? Yeah, those weren't gifts. Those fuzzy little monsters caught and ate those poor bastards. Ewoks are a carnivorous race that considers humanoid flesh a delicacy. They prepare fires in anticipation of eating Han, Luke and Chewbacca to absorb their power. I doubt that they'd eat humans around other humans. Once we set up good relations with them, what you should be asking yourself is, why did the Ewoks have log traps ready to go that can hurt something the size of an AT-ST? There are large carnivores on the planet the Ewoks have to hunt. I'm loving the idea that Ewoks are the apex predator on a planet that has some ravenous T-Rex sized alien monstrosity. Early man just stalked larger animals till they tired out. Happy Feet took a weird and dark turn about 2/3 of the way through when it switched to live action. In my head Happy Feet and Surf's Up are like the same movie. What was the deal with 2006/07 and Penguin movies? For years I thought that Surf's Up was some kind of bizarre fever dream I had. Nope, it's real. Strange fucking movie. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. It's pretty dark. I read somewhere that he possibly suffers from narcissistic personality disorder. For example, he wears clothes that stand out, so he is always the center of attention. He dismisses questions when they are asked because he can't stand criticism. He placed all those kids in danger with not a care in the world. There's a lot more examples. It's weird when you look back on these children's stories because you realize it goes a lot deeper. Just about everything that originated from the mind of Roald Dahl is pretty freaking dark at its core. Roald Dahl himself was a pretty messed up person mentally, given his abusive childhood and the fact he survived a plane crash alone lost in the desert. All the adults are shitty garbage people in his stories because he lived a horrible life. Poor dude. Today I learned. Kingsman. So many babies murdered off screen by their parents. Sure, X's mom and his little sister are okay, but not everyone got a phone call telling them to lock their kid in the bathroom. Yeah, I've always wondered how many deaths there were before Eggsy was able to stop Valentine. A lot. Thing about places like hospitals, primary schools, kindergarten, where one segment of the population is obviously massively superior to the rest. Then you have things like police, soldiers. Then there are the people dealing with their families having murdered each other. I mean, how do you sit down for Christmas dinner when you remember daddy beating mummy to death with a baseball bat? Or going for your siblings' eyes? Really? The shit must have been life altering for a significant number of people on the planet. What about the people who killed somebody under the V-Day effect? What do you do when you remember beating somebody to death through no fault of your own? Fuck. The effects of the V-Day would have been so much more interesting than the second movie. The Wizard of Oz. Glinda the Good Witch pretty much used Dorothy and her friends to kill the Wicked Witch of the West so she could gain power. She may be a good witch, but still. Wow. What happened is that there were 2 good witches in the book and only the second one knows how it works. Wall-E. Didn't a scene from the movie show that when the Earth was evacuated, the whole planet was controlled by and large, a huge mega corporation literally bought the planet and then destroyed it in their mission to make as much money as possible. Wall-E is basically kid-friendly cyberpunk. Most Studio Ghibli movies. They are kids movies with sometimes depressing or dark messages behind them. Grave of the Fireflies is a prime example. Many kids cried when leaving the cinemas. It was a shock. I think people do realize how dark that is though. Grave of the Fireflies is pretty much the worst answer to this question. I'd argue it's not even really a kids movie. There's plenty of Studio Ghibli movies that are low-key dark, but Grave of the Fireflies is not one of them. It's one of the most depressing movies ever made, and it does not hide that fact from you. For a good answer to this question, I'd say My Neighbor Totoro. I think the interpretation that it's a movie about 2 kids coping with loss or expected loss is valid, and it's definitely the movie that I looked at the most differently watching it as a kid versus watching it as an adult. Grave of the Fireflies was shown as a double feature with My Neighbor Totoro when originally released. I wonder which one was shown first. The Rugrats movie. Tommy almost murders his infant brother by covering him with mashed bananas and feeding him to hungry monkeys because he's crying. Shit's dark as fuck. For real. That's the one scene that stuck with me the most, and I just remember crying as a jun watching that emotional roller coaster of a film. What gets me is when Tommy cuddles the shoe in the closet because he can't get his parents' attention long enough for them to tuck him into bed. We've all been there where you just feel completely invisible and unloved. That movie never fails to convey the same emotions as deeply as the first time I saw it when I was a child. Agreed. We've all been there. That movie hit on so many levels, and honestly it deserves way more credit than it got. Thor Ragnarok without the comedy. It's a very depressing, but still good, movie. Everything goes wrong and culminates with the destruction of his home. In a way, though, that had to happen. Ultimately the only way it could have been prevented was if Loki didn't throw Odin into a retirement home on Earth. But after that, There was no way Asgard could have continued to exist without Hela becoming so powerful she'd start waging genocide on the universe. Most definitely. I have no problems with the movie. It's just sad that it all had to happen. The comedy helps a lot. That's Taka's style. Cars. It is really just sad. It shows an old way of life being left behind. For a children's movie, Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island is pretty dark. The ending would be terrifying to little kids. It's like an animated horror movie. Yeah, the whole point of Scooby is to show kids there's no such things as ghosts. Frozen 1. A child who was forced to suppress her emotions, just so that the adults in the family felt like the situation is under their control. Conceive. Don't feel. 2. Wealth is not the same as happiness. 3. The purest of pure and the kindest of kind PPL are the loneliest ones. 4. How Elsa is taught that being emotionally vulnerable is weak. Conceive. Don't feel might be the best typo I've seen this week, and probably the most historically accurate. Gremlins. That Santa Claus chimney monologue. Nemo. Who wouldn't love a movie about someone's kid being kidnapped after his wife and 999 other kids were brutally murdered? Damn. If you made this movie with people it would be dark as hell. Now I want a studio or director who only makes horror movies out of Disney movie plots. Oh god. I mean, some of the Grimm's fairy tales were already dark AF and Disney lightened them up a bit. So fairy tales as horror movies make sense. But the idea of someone taking Nemo or Wall-E or Toy Story and making them legit horror is, well, horrifying. Now I want this too. Maybe the one about the family where the serial killer killed the mother and all but one of the children and the one left was left disabled until he's abducted and his father has to find him with only the help of a mentally disabled woman. Nah, Finding Nemo wasn't that bad. That's the best description of Finding Nemo I've ever heard. A lot of Disney movies, well at least their backstories, especially The Little Mermaid, also Coraline was horrifying. Hocus Pocus. And I forget what it was called. But there was this movie that had witches turning kids into mice that was definitely dark, and I enjoyed that one as a kiddo. And Pinocchio, when you think about all the kids becoming donkeys. The Witches is the movie with witches turning kids into mice. The scenes where the witches took off their costumes were super disturbing for kids. At the end of the movie, the protagonist is changed back into a boy. At the end of the book, he is stuck as a mouse forever, but okay with it, because this way he can die before his grandmother, who probably won't live for many more years. Thanks, doll. Child me had to sit with that one for a while. Holy fuck. I'm reading this book to my 6-year-old. We only have 3 chapters left. Are you kidding me? What am I supposed to do here? This will make her so upset. She cried when he turned into a mouse, and I said I'm sure he'll turn back. They'll figure it out. Talk about the ending. And if it upsets her, have her help you write a happier ending. Fanfiction is therapy. If it helps. The kid really does seem content as a mouse, and they build contraptions, so he can do things around the house. Office Space. A deleted scene implies that Lumbergh died in the fire. Some say he was still waiting on the cover sheet for the TPS report. You did get the memo, right? If you are new to Tattletale TV, please subscribe. I have new videos every day. Stay tuned right now for another